No, the brief was to talk about how do we implement TLOs in a large university, large GO8 university. That was the brief. So basically what I want to do is how I saw it from my perspective as an associate dean then, how this could be developed and how this could happen. So we have the science TLO. So this is a set of characteristics we expect every science graduate to have as a minimum. And we all agree that we all think that this is a great thing to have. Where do we have to implement them? In my case, and probably most cases, is in the Bachelor of Science. You can have different flavors of the Bachelor of Science, but that's where you have to implement them. Very simple, just implement them, do them. Who has to do that? Usually it's the associate dean who scratches his or her head to see, well, how on earth I'm going to do that. And why do we have this scratching of the head? Because it's not just implementing the TLOs. The whole environment is very clouded and very messy. We have TEXA on the one hand, we have the standards now in draft form. And we're talking about the learning outcome standards. We've got the AQF. And we have the graduate attributes of our own institutions. So we've got all these different things that are happening all at the same time. And they all more or less mean the same thing. And put pressure on the Bachelor of Science. Yeah? So that's happening at university, national levels, outside the real context, outside the coalface. What's happening at the coalface? We've got several schools who contribute to the Bachelor of Science. We've got lots of them. It's really a very broad church. It's not just the fundamental sciences like biology, mathematics, physics, and so on, but we also have psychology, geography, all the biomedical sciences, and so on. And in our case, that means, I think last time I counted, 25 different schools of departments, 5 different faculties. How do you make that happen when there's so many people who want to be part of that? And usually these many schools and faculties see the Bachelor of Science as a pie, and they want to have a slice of that pie. And I'm thinking pie in terms of money, in terms of load, in terms of enthusing students with their own discipline. So that's the reality that we have to face. These people who all want to have an input into a slice of the Bachelor of Science, but they don't want to put anything back. So how do you implement threshold learning outcomes when there are so many different agendas? Now these people who are at the coalface are the ones that actually need to implement them. It's not the associate dean is up there, outside the disciplines. It's the people in the departments who have the responsibility to teach the units and to make sure that the threshold learning outcomes are there, are implemented. And they don't even think about the science TLOs. They just think about that pie. How do I make sure that I get a slice of it? And how do I make sure that I produce more people like me, right? Cloning ourselves. And that's really the agenda of every school. Right or wrong, but it's the reality, yeah? And in university like ours, where research is really important, and if you don't do well in research, you don't have a job, you can imagine that adds further pressure to all this. So as associate dean, sometimes I felt like that. So how on earth do I do this? And then the way I'm going to looked at it is, well, what are the opportunities? What are the things that I can use in order to make sure that this starts happening? It's not that it happened, it starts happening. We start talking about these things. So I'm going to talk about 3 different opportunities that I grabbed and took the opportunity to do something around the TLOs. First opportunity. We were asked last year, or the year before last, to, with the AQF, we had to make sure that the learning outcomes of all our courses we offer at Monash aligned with the requirements of the AQF Level 7 qualifications. So we had to do that. That was a requirement. As associate dean, I had to do it. So I took the opportunity to rewrite the Bachelor of Science learning outcomes and rewrite them in such a way that they align with the science TLOs, they align with the graduate attributes of the university, and that they are compliant with the Australian qualification framework. So that was the obvious thing to do, is basically simplify the language we used around graduate attributes, around threshold learning outcomes. And we also know that the standards are using the threshold learning outcomes, the standards that are in draft form that Liz mentioned before. These standards will be allowing us to use external reference points like the threshold learning outcomes and also the AQF. So in that way you close the circle. If you just make sure that you fix the learning outcomes for the Bachelor of Science, everything else falls into place. Yeah? So that was approach number one, simplify the problem, remove acronyms, make sure that everything is nice and simple. So from the point of view of our staff, we are talking about the Bachelor of Science learning outcomes. They don't know about the TLOs, they don't know about the AQF, they don't know about anything else. Because through their learning outcomes, everything is aligned to the different agendas. Okay? So that was the first opportunity, simplify the problem, make sure that everybody, as far as possible, aligns with the Bachelor of Science learning outcomes. Second opportunity, we reviewed the Bachelor of Science last year. We completed the review at the end of last year. This is a normal 5-year review of a course. It doesn't really require to go down into every discipline. The Bachelor of Science, the review of any course at Monash University, it's a really top-level review. So what I said at that point, given the changing environment, given that Monash was going to be the first university, was actually last year, the first university that went through the TEXA reaccreditation process. So that was a good opportunity to say, really, we have to be serious about that. Last time we reviewed the Bachelor of Science, we just looked at the broad requirements of the Bachelor of Science. Now we're going to go deeper and at the same time review all the different disciplines or the different areas of studies that we call them, majors and minors. So every school department had to review their disciplines. And they had to review it according to the different requirements we've got here. They had to make so the Bachelor of Science review had a review document, which was the top level kind of document about the requirements of the BSc. And then there was another very thick document where we had all the reviews of all the different areas of studies. It was I call it mini review, so it was not supposed to be very resource and time intensive, but every major or every area of study had to be reviewed according to these guidelines here. The first thing, for every major, they had to make a statement of the strategic importance and relevance of that particular major within the Bachelor of Science. Why should have them? Why should we have that major within the Bachelor of Science at Monash? That was the very first question. And it took some thinking. The second question was appropriateness of teaching and assessment approaches used in the sequences. These sequences are majors and minors for us. So basically they had to comment on the teaching and assessment approaches they use in their majors and areas of studies, and show how they meet the learning outcomes of the Bachelor of Science as redefined. The third aspect they need to address is align those sequences with the learning outcomes. And the alignment was, the requirement was to use the learning outcomes mapping of the sequence to address the following questions. So 2 questions that they were asked. To what extent are the Bachelor of Science learning outcomes assessed? And are there any gaps overall? Or are there any gaps at a particular year level? Basically doing a mapping exercise, a typical mapping exercise we've seen before. Now this is probably not really at all, but these are the Bachelor of Science learning outcomes. And for each unit, and not all of them are listed here, they had to indicate, there were two ways of indicating. One was whether the learning outcome was present, and the other one whether it was present and assessed, right? So basically they had to do a mapping, and then they had to look at that mapping and see, so we're up to here, what kind of adjustments would be required to address the gaps they saw in during that gap mapping exercise. And finally, based on what they found, they had to summarize the strengths of the major or area of study and make recommendations on what should be done to improve it. So it's like a mini review, right? Now this looks obvious and simple, but the important thing that it was done through the Faculty of Education Committee. It's not that they just went away and they gave me a document, we compiled the documents and that was it. It was done through the Faculty of Education Committee. And each of those had to be reviewed by a peer. It's not that they just put it forward and was there, but it had to be approved by the Faculty Education Committee. So each of those mini reviews went through a sequence of refining. And we had quite interesting conversations around at the meetings, how they were criticizing, critiquing each other. So there was some thinking going on there. And it was, we went from, for example, there was one particular school who said, Cristina, you are much better at writing learning outcomes. You just do it and then you tell me what to do. So that was the easy way. That was the starting point, but at the end, they really came up with a good document. They really did some thinking within their school or department to see where the problems are and come up with possible solutions on how they were going to address the gaps. Very simple approach, obvious to do, but the important thing was to develop that sense of need. Really, we can't just leave this, we have to make it happen. And the second one is the peer review aspect. That was the important one. That everybody looked at each other's mini reviews and had the opportunity to critique. That doesn't mean that we've got everything fixed and done and all that. So the mini review for each area of study showed that there are gaps in some cases. Now the issue is how they're going to address those gaps. And that's no longer my problem because I'm not the ACDS. So David will have to take care of that. But there are clear pointers to improvement there, and they need to happen now. Okay? It's not the end of the story, it's a work in progress. So another opportunity, very simple, it was out there, grab it to drive the agenda. Third opportunity, had this opportunity of forging new collaborations with the Faculty of Education. It kind of started, although that's not entirely true, so we do have some collaborations with the Faculty of Education through the new science school we have on campus. But we really wanted to make it more meaningful. And the whole issue around, the issue related to the money that was provided through CHAP's office, that gave us an opportunity to really think how can we work better together, but genuinely, not just on paper. How could we really work better together? And one of the things that we wanted to do is strengthen the collaboration between the two faculties of education, and the way to do it is having collaborative research. So the two faculties getting together and doing some research together, rather than just doing what was strictly necessary around your Monash Science School. And Jerry here is part of that too. It's just started very recently. The obvious question was what to do, what can we do together, what can we research together? One of the obvious answers is, well, let's work on the implementation of TLOs. How can the two faculties work together around implementation of TLOs? And we started with a project now, started scoping the project, the scope of the project is going to be around how do individual academics see the TLOs in their own context? How do they interpret it? How do they make it happen? So that's our starting point. It's not going to be the end of it, but it's a way of bringing to actually serve two agendas. The agenda of collaboration between the two faculties and the agenda of making sure that our graduates look like we would like them to look like. In other words, implementing the TLOs. Again, very simple, align agendas as far as possible. It's another way of grabbing opportunities. So as a summary, my approach was always make the most of every opportunity you can get out there to align agendas. We know that academics are very time poor, so make sure that you simplify the language and align as much as possible all the processes and activities. Everybody's busy, everybody has things to do. Don't try to overwhelm them with stuff that's happening out there. The role of the associate dean is to simplify these things, but in a meaningful way, not just to tick boxes. And the other point I wanted to make sure is that, where possible, introduce a competitive edge to everything you do. So don't just try to work with an individual discipline here, another individual discipline there. Try to create some competition amongst them, because in that way you can maximize your opportunities for really making improvements. That's my perspective. That's how I see it from my point of view. And as I said, David will have to carry this forward.
Thank you very much, Cristina.